Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on today's show, I know it's kind of taking a little bit of the wind out of the sails, not that the Texans traded out of the first round, but I want to look at 10 guys who maybe they won't be there at 42, but I am hoping that they fall down draft boards, maybe a draft day little slide to pick 42 for the Texans. I'll tell you my top 10 guys I'm hoping fall to pick 42 for the Houston Texans. But before we get into that, I looked into a little bit of our analytics here on the channel, and I noticed a couple things. One, over 62% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed yet. So go down and hit that sub button for daily Texans news and rumors content. It's 100% free, and it helps me out a ton. We are the fastest growing Texans channel on YouTube. So help us out, join the wave, and hit that sub button. And the other kind of interesting fact, 85% of y'all haven't hit that noti bell yet. Whenever you hit this button, that means whenever we drop a video, it lets you know. So if there's any Texans breaking news or if there's something that happens around the team, you'll be the first one to be notified. So help me get my numbers up. Show my bosses that Texans fans, they're not here to mess around. Go down, hit the sub button, and hit that notification bell. Select the all option so that whenever we drop a video, you get notified here on Texans Today. Now, let's get into my top 10 guys. First up, and this isn't in any particular order. I just kind of looked at 10 guys that I really hope fall to pick 42. First one is Darius Robinson, defensive lineman out of Mizzou. He had a really good year this past season, and he has a lot of inside-outside versatility along the defensive line. Played all over that Missouri defensive line during his time there. This past season, 43 tackles, 8.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. A big dude, 6'5", almost 300 pounds. So you see, he can kind of play that outside. He can also play over the inside. This was his snap alignment while at Missouri. He was in the A gap of around 102 snaps, the B gap 596 snaps, over the tackle 166, and outside the tackle 403. So he's comfortable playing inside and on the outside all along the defensive line. So I really like that versatility that he brings. I really hope he falls to 42. He's been mocked anywhere from 31, 32 to that 40 range. So if this is a guy that falls to 42, I really hope the Texans consider drafting the kid out of Missouri. Next up, another defensive lineman, and he's been one of the most popular picks in almost every mock draft that I've received from Texans fans, and it's Braden Fiske, defensive lineman, defensive tackle from Florida State. And right now in all the mock drafts, you're able to get Fiske at 42, but when it comes to draft day, I don't know if he'll be there at 42. I mean, he had an amazing combine, is going up draft boards as we speak. He's kind of fighting Johnny Newton and Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy for those top defensive tackles in the class, and he really shined at the combine. So once we get closer and closer to draft day, I wouldn't be surprised if he is a sneaky first-round pick option for some of these teams. We look at what he did at the combine, and this is the RAS, Relative Athletic Score. It kind of takes all of his athletic testing at the combine and gives it a scale of 1 to 10. Yeah, 10 being the highest. He got 9.97. Great size, great agility and speed for a guy at his size. I mean, we look at the vertical broad jump, elite for a guy that is his size, and the speed testing, elite as well. So I would really love for the Texans to be able to get a guy like Fiske at a position of need, but this kind of brings up my first question, and I want to hear from you folks at home. Get down in the comment section. Should the Texans draft whoever's the best player available? So regardless of position, maybe they don't really need a running back right now, but the best player on the board is a running back. What do you say? Do they go BPA, or do you want them to draft a certain position? Either type BPA in the comment section for whoever the best player available is, I want the Texans to draft, or do you think they need to target a specific position at 42? Because unless they make another move in free agency, I might be typing a position because I don't know if they can go into this draft and not draft a corner with one of their first 2 picks. And that's why this next guy on my list is Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri. He had a really good season this past year for the Tigers, along with his teammate Darius Robinson. And Rakestraw is a really good talent. Plays up really well in zone coverage, which is what D'Amico Ryans and this defense really likes to do. Rakestraw out of Missouri is a really good option. I think if they were able to get him at 42, regardless of who else is on there, overall 80.7 PFF grade, a zone coverage grade of 85.2. Like I said, he really thrives in zone coverage and man coverage. Maybe not his specialty, but also a really good run defense corner at 89. If we could get a guy on the outside like Rakestraw, I think that could propel this D'Amico Ryans defense, because they're still looking for somebody opposite of Derek Stingley, and they've kind of tested the waters with Jeff Okudah, CJ Henderson, maybe getting some untapped potential out of those former top 10 guys. But I still think they need to add another guy to kind of challenge those guys during practice, during OTAs in the preseason. And that's why this next guy on my list, I went back-to-back corners here as well. TJ Tampa, another guy who I hope falls down draft boards. Tampa from Iowa State, a longer, lengthier corner, really good speed, really good athleticism at the cornerback position, 44 tackles, 2 interceptions, 7 pass breakups this past season for the Cyclones. And another guy who really thrives in zone coverage. The Texans like to implement that zone coverage, maybe send blitzes here and there or send 4 and just drop into coverage. 75.8 zone coverage grade from PFF in 2023, a 75.8 overall grade as well. 69 nice man coverage grade. Not as highly touted in run defense as Ennis Rakestraw, but I think TJ Tampa is another really good option there for the Texans at 42. So if it was up to these two guys, if somehow they both fell to 42, who would you want the Texans to draft? Type ER for Ennis Rakestraw, type TT for TJ Tampa. Let me know down in the comment section. Next up, linebacker Payton Wilson from NC State. And this is a guy where kind of goes back to my best player available question now. Linebacker isn't the largest need for the Texans going into the 2024 NFL draft, but Payton Wilson might be the best linebacker in the entire draft. And if he falls to 42, because it's kind of like a not top-heavy linebacker draft this season, I think the Texans might have to consider taking a guy like this. Like, you still have some holes at the linebacker spot. You have Christian Harris, who shined at the end of last year. Azeez Al-Shire, which is D'Amico Ryans' guy, going back to his San Francisco days. They have a really good connection. And it really comes down to Henry To'oTo'o. Is he ready to take that next step and be a starting linebacker in the National Football League? Or do they not feel comfortable and want to draft a guy like Payton Wilson to step in and maybe challenge To'oTo'o for that starting role? I think if he is there, it's going to be hard for the Texans to not go up and draft Payton Wilson, especially with they have a somewhat need at linebacker. And if you can get the best guy at any position in the draft, that's a huge win, especially if your first selection is in the second round at pick 42. And that's why I did the same thing with this next guy, Tyler Nubin, safety out of Minnesota. Now, safety is another need where it's like, it's very split on whether people think it's a huge need for the Houston Texans. But either way, if Tyler Nubin's on the board, he's the best safety in this year's class. You can get the best player at a position with your first pick in the second round. I say you do it. Like, Tyler Nubin has had a fantastic career at Minnesota. We look at his numbers the past 4 years, 5 interceptions, 4 interceptions, 3 interceptions. He is a ball-hawking safety on the back end. And if the Texans can add that to a Jalen Petrie, to a Jimmy Ward in the back end of that defense, that could really help this Texans defense moving forward into 2024. Now, coming up, I have 4 offensive players that I really want to see slide to the Texans at pick 42. But before I do, I mentioned why you should hit the notification bell earlier on in today's show. And I want to give a special shout out to these people, a member of the Noti gang. Those are the people that are the first 5 people to comment on a Texans video. The last video that I put out here on Texans Today, these were the first 5 commenters. Juan Prado, Lover O'Git, Caleb Kaufman, who, Caleb, you're a real one. I would appreciate you. He is one of the first 5 people to comment on almost every video that I drop here on the channel. Real big shout out to you, Caleb. Also, Tevin and MAB Squad were also on the first 5. They got their notifications turned on, so why don't you? Go down and hit that notification bell. Turn on your notifications so when we drop a video, you get notified. Now, let's go to my 4 offensive guys. And this first one, Adonai Mitchell, maybe it's a pipe dream, because after the combine, a lot of people are talking about him being a round 1 prospect, maybe in that 30 to 32 range. But if he somehow falls, because this wide receiver class is so deep, and you never know, maybe somebody has a guy like Roman Wilson higher than him. Maybe somebody has a guy like Keon Coleman a little bit higher than him. You never know with these wide receivers. Heck, we saw CeeDee Lamb fall all the way to the Cowboys, and he was regarded as the best wide receiver in that class. Could a guy like Adonai Mitchell fall to the Texans at 42? If he does, I would be running my card up, even though wide receiver isn't a huge need for the Texans. They have Nico Collins, they have Tank Dell, but to add a weapon like Mitchell would be insane. 55 receptions, 845 yards, and 11 touchdowns this past season for the Longhorns. That would be an amazing trio of wide receivers for C.J. Stroud to pick apart defenses next season. And that's why this next guy on my list, it's actually his teammate, Xavier Worthy, the other wide receiver from Texas. I thought they were both really good prospects going into the draft this season. Xavier Worthy, over 1,000 yards this past season for the Longhorns, 5 touchdowns, and then we saw what he did at the Combine. I mean, setting a record, right? A 40-yard dash record, 4.21, the best 40-yard dash time ever recorded at the NFL Combine. To get a speedster like that can take the top off of a defense, even if he's not your best wide receiver, every defense is going to be worried because you have a guy that can absolutely burn defensive backs on the back end. So getting a guy like Xavier Worthy, if he's there at 42, would be very tempting for me if I'm the Texans front office on day 2 of the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, should the Texans take a wide receiver in round 2? There's a lot of good options, and there's an argument to be made of like, hey, there's other needs that the Texans have that could be filled out, and then you can get a wide receiver later in the draft. There's still a lot of good receivers that are going to be available in round 3, possibly round 4. So do you take one of the top guys in round 2, or do you wait and maybe get a guy who is still good but not a premier guy at the wide receiver position? Give me a yes, give me a no. What do you think? Should the Texans take a wide receiver in round 2? Now this one might be an unpopular opinion among some people, and it's a very slim chance that he falls down draft boards, but he's an interior offensive lineman, so you never know. Jackson Powers Johnson, interior offensive lineman from Oregon. Now, this is another pipe dream because he's going in like the 20s in a lot of mock drafts now, but you never know because, like I said, interior offensive linemen, they don't usually get as much love as the guys on the outside, the offensive tackles of the world. So if somehow a Jackson Powers Johnson is there at pick 42, which a couple teams I've heard are rumored to be actually higher on the center from West Virginia, Zach Frazier. I was going back and forth who I should put because I still think interior offensive line is another position the Texans need to target this year in the NFL Draft. Jackson Powers Johnson this past season at Oregon, 84.3 overall PFF grade, a run blocking grade of 85.2, and a pass blocking grade of 90.6. You're not going to get better grades than that from anybody else in the draft at this position. Jackson Powers Johnson would be a steal at pick 42. And my last pick, or my last guy that I hope drops to pick 42, Jordan Morgan, offensive lineman from Arizona. Now, he mostly played offensive tackle at the University of Arizona, and he had a really good year this past year, 83.5 overall, a run blocking grade of 77.0, and a pass blocking grade of 87.3. But I think he could also possibly be moved in to a guard spot, and I just don't feel comfortable with the Texans' left guard situation. Plus, Laramie Tunsil being injured this past season, having knee surgery, even though it was successful, he should be ready to go for OTAs and training camp. I'd still like another option if Laramie Tunsil goes down this year, and if Jordan Morgan is there at pick 42, maybe you get a guy who can slot in at guard and eventually take over for Tunsil or slide over to left tackle if he does get injured. That's why Jordan Morgan is my last guy who I really hope falls to pick 42 for the Houston Texans. Now, go down in the comment section and let me know, did I miss anybody? Is there anybody that you hope falls to pick 42? Let's be realistic. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, they're not falling to pick 42. Neither are Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, Marvin Harrison Jr. Those guys aren't falling to pick 42. But give me somebody realistic. Make sure you give me a follow on Twitter at Jeremy Chugs. And as always, go down and hit that sub button. We are the fastest growing Texans channel on YouTube. And I always say, hit the subscribe button. Give me 1 week. Let me prove to you why we are the best Texans channel on YouTube. If you don't like it in a week, all good. Hit that unsub button. No skin off my back. But let me prove to you why we are the #1 Texans channel on YouTube.